All right, everyone. We're going to start the meeting now. Looks like we have a small little group here. I'm going to keep admitting people as the meeting continues. But let's officially draw your attention here. So good evening, all. Welcome to the virtual wildfire speaker series hosted by the Ventura County Resource Conservation District and the Ventura Regional Fire Safe Council. My name's Andy Spurk. I'm your host for the evening. I work for the Ventura County Resource Conservation District, a special district of the state of California, your local resource conservation district. I'm also here on behalf of my colleague, Elaine Himmelfarb, who is the Executive Director of the Ventura Regional Fire Safe Council. Fortunately, she cannot make it tonight. That being said, I want to thank all of you for taking the time to sit in on this very important webinar series. Wildfires are present and clear danger in our neck of the woods out here in the West. It isn't a matter of if, but when the next wildfire will come and how intense it will be. To help mitigate and recover from this threat, the Ventura County Resource Conservation District offers a variety of free wildfire-related opportunities, ranging from recovery funding and technical assistance to giving tours at our wildfire prevention demonstration garden in Somis, as you can see behind me, and of course, educational speaker series such as this. This speaker series, funded by CAL FIRE, spans across the next 2 years discussing everything wildfire. We meet bi-monthly on the first Tuesday at 6 p.m. with a new speaker and topic each time. This sort of webinar series is meant to act as an informal junction between wildfire experts and the general community. We encourage all community members to be engaged and prepare questions for the last 20 or 15 minutes of the webinar, at which point the Q&A session opens up. With that being said, I'd like to frame tonight's conversation. We'll be discussing home hardening, which is essentially what you can do to better protect your home from wildfire. You may think you're prepared and already expect the worst, but I promise you that you'll learn something new tonight. I hope that this is an eyes wide open experience for each and every one of you, especially those who live in the wildland urban interface, because we need to remember it's your responsibility to prevent wildfire from threatening your home. That being said, I'd like to introduce the guest speaker for tonight, Woody Buska. Woody is the president of Surefire Training Incorporated, a corporation that specializes in delivering high quality professional wildfire consulting, analysis, planning, and education services. Surefire Training provides practical solutions and prepares information for use by emergency responders, municipal officials, land use planners, residents, and industries that operate in the wildland urban interface. Woody has over 40 years of experience in the fire service and is a wildfire risk analysis and mitigation specialist. He has also authored and developed numerous training programs and publications. Woody is an accredited member of the California State Fire Instructor who teaches a variety of courses at fire academies and other government and corporate venues throughout the state. He received his former education from UC Davis in wildfire biology. That being said, Woody, please feel free to take it over.
All right, very good. I hope you can hear me, right, Andy? Good.
Yes, we can, loud and clear.
Okay. All right, very good. Well, thanks for that introduction. We'll get started. I've got a lot of information here. I've got a short period of time, so I'll probably be running through this rather quickly. If you have questions, please chime in on those questions. You could use the chat feature as well. I'll be checking that throughout the presentation. And then I'll have time. I'll stay as long as it takes at the end to answer any of those questions. All right, so it's inevitable, as Andy said, wildfire is coming. Question is, are you prepared? Also put my phone number here on the chat as well. If you didn't see that, here we have my phone number. And if you're unable to watch the screen and just listening in, the number is area code 925-989-0983. Feel free to call me anytime after the presentation. If you have any questions or want any follow-up on any of the things we discussed today. And you can also reach me at surefiretraining@yahoo.com. So I see everybody's muted already, and you can also use that chat function. We do have one video at the end, so during that video, it helps if everybody mutes their video as well. All right, so the goal of this program tonight is to inform and educate homeowners on how to better prepare their homes, your homes, and surrounding property to withstand the threat of wildfire. And tonight we're going to discuss review of the wildfire problem. You're probably all aware of that already, but We'll talk about the hazards associated with wildland fire. And we'll get into how wildland fire works, wildland fire behavior, and then discuss the concepts of defensible space, the home ignition zone, home hardening, and at the end, we'll talk about setting goals and getting prepared for wildfire. All right, what we know, wildfire is not a new problem. The fire is a historical and ecological part of California. Large fires have occurred throughout history and are continuing to occur. Just probably see the news recently. It looks like we're going to break possibly another record with the Dixie Fire about to go over 1 million acres. Numerous populated areas are vulnerable to the effects of extreme wildland fire behavior. And that fire will continue to be a threat in California. Right, not going away anytime soon. The recent fires have resulted in entire neighborhoods and communities being destroyed by fires started by embers, not the wildfire itself. So we typically think of fire as a wave that threatens these communities, but it's these embers out in advance of the wildfire that are thrown out by the wind that are actually doing the most destruction and accelerating at the rate at the fire spread. The reality is, during a major wildfire, there are simply not enough fire engines or firefighters to defend every home, especially during the first hours of that major wildfire. So you must become part of the solution, and that's what this program's about. And if you're following the recent fire problems, you're seeing them, they're talking about not enough resources, and that's going to continue to be one of the issues. All right, so what is new? Not the occurrence of large destructive wildfires, but a national engagement in this problem of home destruction, specifically after a recent catastrophic wildfire event. So say maybe the last 5 to 7 years, we've really been looking at this and talking about it more frequently. And the problem has been out there for quite some time, and the research has been going on for decades. There's a focus on more than just defensible space, and that's what we used to just hear about was defensible space. Now that focus is on structure ignition potential, and we're calling that area, that complete area, the home ignition zone. So that includes defensible space and the home ignition zone or home hardening, and more preparation on a neighborhood level is needed to avoid that house-to-house ignition, which requires a community involvement. So that's where the Resource Conservation District, the Fire Safe Council have been sponsoring programs like this to get the awareness out, try to get that community effort going. Adapting to wildfire with proper education, planning, and preparation, the potential hazards related to wildfire can be reduced. And you can see here, this home that was properly prepared and situated withstood a wildfire on its own. So these are proven methods for homeowners to prepare their homes to withstand the threat of wildfire. And this is based on science, where there's been a lot of research by Dr. Jack Cohen with the U.S. Forest Service to put a lot of this information together through National Fire Protection Agency, CAL FIRE, et cetera. So one of the things we need to understand first before we can get into how to prevent our home ignitions and how to better prepare for this fire is, how does fire work? How does wildfire work? And it can be broken down into 3 simple components: weather, topography, and fuels. And until one of those components is changed dramatically, the fire is going to continue to burn. So either the weather changes, or we start to get cooler weather, or more moist weather, or the topography changes where it stops running on steep slopes or runs into the ocean, or the fuel changes and we go into areas that have less fuels or fuels that aren't as available for that fire. So weather, topography, fuels are the 3 components to think about. All right, and the fire environment. What makes some wildfires burn so intense and others not? So it's related to one of those 3 components, or the combination of those 3 components. You know, what makes fires spread fast one moment and slow another. Right, the same fire, the same day, could be different terrain, fuel, or micro changes in the weather. All right, so it's easy to remember the WTF, right? We've all heard that before. We'll think of it as weather, topography, fuels, or in the wildland fire environment. You can see that each one of those legs is a little more complex. For weather, we've got temperature, humidity, wind, precipitation, atmospheric stability as a few of the factors. And fuels, we have the availability, what's the continuity of the fuel or the arrangement, the size, the dryness, the temperature. And then topography, we're looking at the shape of the land, the steepness of the slopes, the aspect, or which way the slopes face related to the sun. So you can see there's quite a few variables there, and each one of those variables have other variables that are part of it. So it's very complex. And if you think about just predicting the weather, how difficult that is, and to get that exact, and then add the other components of the fuels, topography, and then how the whole thing chain reacts together. As fire burns, it creates, you've often heard, creates its own weather, but it definitely influences the conditions of the fuels there as well. So important weather variables, again, are temperature, humidity, precipitation, wind. And so, for example, hot, dry weather, vegetation can dry out quicker and ignite easier. So for us in Southern California here, where I'm assuming most of you are from, you know that the Santa Ana winds are, our significant fire season events. And what we have is east winds that are drying out the fuels, the low humidities associated with that, and then the high wind speeds. Right? And then often with that compressional heating of that high pressure system, we get increased temperatures as well. So wind increases the supply of oxygen to a fire and causes preheating of the fuels in front of a fire, which drives vegetation and speeds up the rate of spread, kind of like a logarithmic effect. Here, as the fire gets larger, the more heat it generates, the more fuels dry out, the bigger it gets, the faster it can spread, etc. Same with steep slopes. They carry fire uphill at an increased rate of spread. Canyons act as channels for wind to spread fire. And those can be small areas, drainages, barrancas, etc. So during the Thomas fire, we saw that there was definitely an influence on what structures were threatened or burned, and they were often associated with the topography and the barrancas. We have slope orientation affects the fuels as the way that slope faces. So the southern slopes or southwest slopes have greater exposure to sun in the afternoon, resulting in higher fuel temperatures, low fuel moistures, and usually more rapid rates of spread of fire. Potential fuels. So we talk about fuels in terms of it's living and dead vegetation, homes and outbuildings as well. Flammability of the fuel depends on the size of the fuel, the density, the moisture content, and chemical properties in some of these plants that ignite or burn more readily or burn longer or more intensely as a result of those chemical properties. One of the things to consider when we're looking at our home ignition zone or our defensible space, I'll get into some definition of those later, but are the fine fuels. So this is one of the things that we want to focus on is removal of these or identification of fine fuels. These are the ones that are easy to ignite by an ember or just a little bit of heat from the flame. And these include needles, grasses, leaves, small twigs. These fuels ignite easily and burn quickly. And I like to term these light flashy fuels, right? So they tend to carry and spread the fire. They're usually where the fire source starts first. We don't have a lot of light flashy fuels, and maybe the heavy fuels can't get going. But you can see some examples here, light flashy fuels even in the canopy of dead pine trees, grass fields, and you can see the flame length that can come out of those light flashy fuels, those grasses as well when aligned with wind and slope. Right, heavier fuels are trees, large limbs, down logs, large shrubs, including homes and outbuildings. They require more energy to ignite, but burn longer and produce more heat. So anybody that's lit a fire in the fireplace or a campfire knows you start with the small stuff and then get to the big stuff. You can't just hold a match to a log and expect it to burn. But the small stuff burns up quick and you'll need the big stuff to continue that heat. Now these larger fuels usually tend to produce more embers into the air. So think about all those structures burning or large logs or massive amounts of fuel that with wind continue to burn and produce those embers. Fuels can be arranged horizontally. So we talk about sparse, patchy, continuous fuels. And one of the things we're going to look at in our defensible space is breaking up that horizontal continuity, making it more difficult from fire to get from one part of our property to another part of our property, or from one bush to another. Then vertically they're arranged in terms we use ground fuels. Those are things inside the ground or in the dirt, roots, duff, etc. Surface fuels are what are on the surface. And then ladder fuels, those carry fire from the ground or surface fuels into the aerial fuels, or that could be called the canopy as well. All right, so some terminology that'll help us down the road. Ladder fuels are typically the shrubs or small trees that are under larger trees. They help carry the fire from the surface up the slopes of the trees. And you can see some examples here of one pine tree on the upper right there that had branches all the way to the ground, brush underneath it, and a significant effect of that ladder fuel there, the heat rising, and as heat rises, preheats up above, get all that convective energy. And then you can see the potential here on the two slides on the bottom, one with a deck that's overhanging fuels directly below it that are highly flammable juniper type species. And you can see the ground fuels in the foreground, the lower fuels that could carry a fire easy and quickly into those larger fuels below the deck and ignite that house on fire, even though it's a stucco siding and a fire resistant roof. And then down here on the left, you can see some leftovers, aftermath from the Woolsey fire. Woolsey fire burned some of this material, but as it went through, it was extinguished, and now there's dead material in there, which now adds to that fuel load. So these folks might be thinking, hey, our house didn't burn as a result of the Woolsey fire, we're good, but now the fuel has changed and there's more dead fuel in that area. All right, with the larger fuels, you get longer flame lengths, higher heat output, longer burning duration than the fine fuels. All right, of these three fire behavior factors, fuel is where residents can affect the greatest change. This is the one that we can change the most. You know, I haven't been very good at changing the weather, right? And that's not very possible, but we can't really change the topography where our house is located when it's established, maybe where we build it when we have an empty lot. But what we can affect is the fuel that's around our property. So you see some examples here, lower left corner, nice landscaping. We've got a lot of rock, not a lot of vegetation against the house, except for this tree. But you'll notice there's not a lot of ladder fuels underneath that tree, so probably not a really significant concern. Some nice landscaping in the center here with the rock garden. Up on the upper right, you can see how the vegetation was cleared on this slope, and we know fire runs up slope faster, so they went heavy on the clearing and cleared a large distance below the slopes of those homes and thinned out that brush. And then you can see again the lower right there, it's a dense thicket there, and that is potential, really serious potential for that structure to be impacted if that area burns. Right, the fire environment, very dynamic. As we said, with all those components interacting with each other, a change in one factor causes that chain reaction, right? Once fire gets started, starts to heat up other fuel, dry things out. These elements and their reactions with one another and the fire itself determine the behavior of the fire. A change in any one of these elements will cause a change in the behavior of the fire, and this change can be very abrupt and rapid. And we could talk about micro scales as well. So on one side of your property, you can have intense fire behavior. On the other side, you might not have much. Or the way the house is situated or shelters from the wind, and the fuels are changed. How that fire can warm and impact. So if your neighbor's house catches on fire that heat intensity, is that going to cause your structure, your house, to ignite? All right, so to review there, what is wildland fire behavior? And that is the manner in which fuels ignite, flames develop, and fire spreads. All right, so we'll move on to what is defensible space. We referred to that. Right, and defensible space is the buffer you create between a building on your property and the grass, trees, shrubs, or basically any wildland fuel or wildland area that's surrounded. All right, so you can see some examples here. This is the Resource Conservation District demonstration garden in Somas at the headquarters there, and a project that they've done. You can see the before pictures and the after. All right, so the after is still some vegetation there. The trees have been lifted up off of the surface, and you don't see ladder fuels bringing anything up. Fuel is reduced. You can look at the siding on that structure too as fire resistant, being a block building. So defensible space, and on the right, you see that it's in zones. We'll talk about those zones in a little bit. This space is needed to slow or stop the spread of fire, and it helps protect your home from catching fire, either from embers, direct flame contact, or radiant heat. And this is where we always used to just focus is on the defensible space, but now we're going to be looking at the structure as well. But it is an important component. Having proper defensible space also provides firefighters a safe area to work in, to defend your home. And you'll see that many firefighters won't, or it's declared unsafe to come into a property that's completely overgrown, doesn't have defensible space. And then also with short resources, the firefighters are going to pick the ones where they can do the most amount of good in the shortest amount of time with the least amount of resources committed, and those would be the ones that are properly prepared. All right, so what is home hardening? Fire hardened means your home is prepared for wildfire. And you can see a good example on the upper right slide there of a home that has some features to it that are going to help prepare it to withstand wildfire. Stucco siding, dual pane windows. It really looks like it's really sealed up well. It's got no vegetation or large vegetation growing up against the structure. It's got a hardscape there between the structure and then a nice green belt with the lawn, right? And a fire resistant roof. Well, fire hardened doesn't necessarily mean that it's fireproof, right? Any structure can eventually burn with enough heat and the right conditions. But home hardening addresses the most vulnerable components of your house with building materials and maintenance and installation techniques that increase resistance to heat, flames, and embers that accompany most wildfires. So most of you probably have an existing home and aren't here at this presentation thinking, well, I've got this lot of land, I'm going to build a new house, I want to make it fire hardened, right? So we're looking at retrofitting, we're looking at maintenance. What can we do with our existing conditions to help improve our survivability profile? We'll take a look at that. Right, home hardening. So embers are responsible for most damage during wildfires. And these embers can accumulate on your home or on or under or around your deck, your porch, in the attic. You don't have proper screens, in crawl spaces below your structure if you don't have proper screens or covers. And these embers can ignite plants, mulch, leaves, fencing, furniture, outdoor furniture, lawn furniture. You can see some examples here. I'll back up one slide here. All right, and you can take a look at the roofing there. So most of these roofs are gone now, but there still are some structures with the wood shake or shingle roofs. You can see how easy it is for an ember to get stuck anywhere in there. Nice ember trap that catch the roof on fire, and then that'll burn with enough intensity to burn into the structure. So, you know, typically a structure fire, as we know it, is from the inside out. Something inside started the house on fire. That's the traditional structure fire. These wildland fires are started from the outside and burn into the house. Now you can see on that lower picture there was a fire right there where the two walls met, where there was probably some accumulation of pine needles or leaves or something like that. And here you can see pine needles or leaves stuff underneath the deck that's accumulated there. Or on the upper right, we've got a house with not much vegetation around it, but probably some wood chips there and a little bit of vegetation that dried out, right, as either a result of the fire or maybe the drought conditions that we're currently in. And then, of course, the wood deck there with some lattice below that, an easy way to burn that house down. Easy way for fire to find a way in, or embers to find a way in. So these embers are bombarding the structure in these winds like we've had in the Thomas and Woolsey fire. And they're just looking for a place to get wedged in and start a fire. And then with that high wind speed, that's going to accelerate the burning condition. All right, so we want to make sure we seal up that house as best as possible. And that includes just simply having high quality paint job, paint sealed, all of the cracks caulked, your tile roof, having all the bird stops or fire stops in there where embers or even birds or other types of wildlife can make a nest in there, and the nest would be a perfect place for an ember to land and start a fire. And then fencing next to the structure, you see that on the right. We'll go over those a little more detail as we come up. So what is the home ignition zone? That's the whole thing here. That's the structure and the defensible space. And it's divided up into these three separate zones. We have the immediate 0 to 5 foot zone that we call zone 1. Keep in mind, there's different publications out there that are putting out different zone names and terminology here, but the concepts are the same. To start with the structure, work your way out, taper these zones, right? So some of them have zone 0 as the house, or 0 to 5, or just plain 0 to 30, and then 30 to 100. But here we're looking at our immediate zone of 0 to 5, right? That includes the house and the first 5 feet around it. Intermediate is the next 5 feet out to 30 feet, and then extended 30 feet to 100 feet. And many of you are probably thinking, but wait, I don't have 100 feet around my structure, right? So that's where it's important to consider what's your neighbor doing, right? Working together with your neighbors. We'll talk about that more a little bit here too. All right, the focus on the structure. So what we want to do is start with the structure first and analyze the potential for embers to get lodged in the structure or ignite the structure. We want to look at cleaning the roof. Is it in good repair? Are there crevices, cracks where these embers can get into? Even though it's a tile roof or a asphalt shingle roof, there are openings that have some combustible material underneath or that those embers can get into, or like I said, bird nests or other accumulations of leaf litter, pine needles. We're going to check our vents, our attic vents, or any vents actually around our structure, and ensure that those are 1/8 inch screen in those vents. So studies have shown that the standard which most of our homes were built with was 1/4 inch screen, and embers fly through those readily, and enough embers with enough size and heat that they can ignite the interior of the structure. Simply installing a smaller mesh screen of 1/8 inch will reduce that potential significantly and prevent most of those embers from getting into the attic or underneath the home to ignite the home. And then that size so small that ember really doesn't carry enough mass, heat potential to really ignite something inside those spaces. Repair and replace window screens. So if windows are open and embers can get through the screens, then they're going to get into your home, ignite your home from the inside to burn out. Remove flammable material away from the structure. Seal gaps and cracks around that structure. Now, one of the things here, removing flammable material, we'll talk about lawn furniture, etc. And it may be something, hey, this is the way I want to live. I want to have this furniture next to my structure. But maybe during red flag days or high wind events or high fire potential or a fire in the area is when some of those actions need to take place, moving that furniture and those items away from your structure. Right here we have a nice structure with looks like well home hardened, tile roof, stucco siding. Looks like it's in good repair, not a lot of vegetation up against the sides. We'll look at different types of roofing. making sure that those roofs are in good condition. Typically, you want to look for a Class A fire rating, and most of the roofs are either tile or asphalt shingle is the most common. Most of the roof structures are gone or already burned down. Then on your tile roofs, look for these. These are called fire stops. They're different than bird stops. Bird stops keep birds from getting in under the tile, and they're not as tight as a fire stop. So different terminology. If you're looking to ask a roofer to do some work for you, ask for those fire stops. Tell them you don't want embers to be able to blow underneath the tile and find some of that wood understructure where it can ignite. Look for places that debris can collect. Now here's an excellent example where two roof lines meet, and you could have a bird nest in there. You can have needles, leaves, whatever accumulating in there. Maybe it's not sealed up properly, so take a good look there. All right, skylights as well. If these skylights open, make sure that they do have 1/8 inch screens. You might be thinking, well, I'll just close my windows when a fire comes. What if you're not home, right? What if you've left the house for the day, left the windows open to get ventilation, and then wildfire occurs, you can't get back into the area because of the evacuation restrictions, and then you left the window open and 1/4 inch screen there. All right, some examples here. So take a look, you know, what could go wrong here, right? At the accumulation of needles. And you may have some areas where this is a routine, or it's going to be routine maintenance, but surely you want to make sure this stuff is removed during high fire danger periods, right? And then think about, where does that material go? Where is it coming from? We know we get these high wind events, and you can take a look around and see, where's everything accumulating and blowing during those events? You can do the best clearing around your house, and then the Santa Ana winds come in and blow all kinds of material back in. Trying to figure out how you might be able to eliminate the potential for it to collect there, or just know that you've got to do some routine maintenance. Right, homes might have their eaves boxed in or not, but you still want to check and make sure that those screens and those vents are at 1/8 inch, and that there aren't any places for embers to really get trapped up. So you can see that upper eave, even though that's an open eave, it looks like it's pretty well secured, as long as those holes there, or those vents, have 1/8 inch. And it's simple fix. You can cut chunks of screen, little squares of screen, 1/8 inch, and staple it right over that, paint it, and you'll never notice it, rather than having to think about going inside or cutting them round to make it fit. Right, looking at your roof and gable vents, different types of vents, different structures, those are all vulnerable unless they have the 1/8 inch screen there. Some more vents below the foundation as well, another intrusion area. There's different types of vent screens that are made, but you can simply order some metal 1/8 inch screen off of Amazon or some other provider. Pick those up. There's some companies that make specific vents for these, called the Vulcan vent is one of them. There's several others out there. And when they are, some of these, when they are heated to a certain temperature, then there's a material in there that closes off to prevent firebrand entry. All right, we're looking at the walls. So we're still looking at the structure. What are the eaves and the walls? Are there areas that embers can get behind siding, trim, etc.? Different types of wall materials. There's metal, wood, engineered wood, vinyl siding. Vinyl siding will melt. It typically doesn't burn. Metal's good. The wood obviously will burn, but if it's painted well and sealed nicely, then it's probably pretty resilient. Stucco is a good one. There's fiber cement boards, or hardy backer board, they'll call it. The cedar shingles, the one to steer away from, right? And if you do have those, there are treatments that can be put on there to help make them more fire resistant. All right, vegetation up against the structure here, and you have wood fence up against that structure. So easy to lead a fire right into this house. We've got wood chips and leaf accumulation underneath, right next to the fence, so easy for embers to get in here. Ignite that, start burning this fence. The fence then burns all this dead material and this vegetation. Probably get some significant flame lengths and heat production out of that. Right up underneath the eaves, light this roof on fire, and then there goes the house, right? That's simple. All right, plate glass windows. Well, many of the older structures, they'll just have real thin glass windows. So this is one of the more expensive repairs or upgrades that can be done, is going to double pane windows. Realizing that the larger the window, the more heat that can come through it. So smaller windows are good if you're designing a structure. Maybe you want to break it down into smaller dual pane windows than one larger pane window. Okay, that's one of those higher expense items. You might look into tempered glass, making sure that you have that greatest level of protection. All right, significant difference between those two layers of glass versus one, and then the tempered glass. Looking for that seal on that pane if you're not sure if it's tempered or not, or looking to see if it's dual pane. Another easy fix here, fire-prone materials next to the structure. So moving a wood pile away from the structure would be a good idea during fire season. And then the types of enclosures underneath this home here, we've got the lattice work where it's easy for embers to get right through that. So that should be backed up by screen, but still that lattice work is very light wood, easy to burn, easy to ignite compared to heavier materials, right? So looking for another solution. And again, you see the gate or the structure, the wooden structure right next to the house, making the house and therefore much more vulnerable to fire. If that burns, then the fire can get probably up into the eaves there. Look at your decks, make sure that they're in good repair. And many of us have deckings, right? So what kind of decking materials to use? The new codes talk about having, or standards talk about having larger spaces between your boards so that the embers fall through. They don't collect in between the boards or into the material that might be lodged in the boards. You can make sure that they're well painted, sealed up. Use some of the new synthetic material is actually fire rated, right? So if you're looking at putting in a Trex type deck or something like that, you can check and purchase the Class A fire rating material for that. All right, heavier timbers are harder to ignite, right? Heavier fuels don't ignite as easy. They burn longer, but often the code will require heavier construction for that very purpose. But you want to make sure underneath that deck is clear. There's no ladder fuels under there. And then sealing up every crack and crevice you can. A lot of work could be done under there to help prevent that from igniting. All right, remember too, if it's attached to the house, it's part of the house and it can easily bring fire to the house. So one of the common problems in neighborhoods is the wooden fences going from one house to another, and those will burn like a wick, taking fire from one structure to the next, and start to take out that neighborhood. Going the wrong way here, I apologize. Get back on track. Okay, now we can look at the intermediate zone, the 5 to 30 feet, create fuel breaks with driveways, walkways, patios, thin out vegetation, keep the weeds and the grass mowed here, remove ladder fuels in this area, space out trees. Here it says 18 feet between canopies, but just trying to get that spacing based on the size of the material. You can cluster these trees and shrubs in small groups. We're trying to make it so that fire can't continuously run from one group to the next group. Break up fuel path to reduce fire intensity and ember intrusion with different types of landscaping. Other things to be concerned about are the vegetation, other structures, flammables that are near the home. Here's a good example, the 5 to 30 foot broken up with lawn area, hardscaping right next to the home in that 5-foot 0 to 5. Another diagram, you'll see this out with a lot of the fire safe materials. They give you some specifics on tree spacing. And you can see the tree spacing increases the distance and the spacing as you come closer to the structure, right? So you don't have to clear cut things. You can use a tapered approach if you have a larger property. We have more dense vegetation farther out, but as you get closer to the structure, that density's reduced, the spacing's increased, and you might have more things breaking it up with the paths and the walkways, et cetera. So you get next to the structure where ideally you don't want anything next to the structure, but that doesn't mean that you can't have something next to your structure. These succulent plants in the rock garden would be fine. Keeping things away from windows where they can create that heat intensity to break that window. Look at your garages, your sheds. Is that a potential for them to ignite easily and then create enough heat to ignite your structure? So we have to treat them as a separate structure here. And then in the 30 to 100 foot zone, we want to remove the litter buildup, remove dead plants, thin out trees, remove ladder fuels, vegetation that might be around storage sheds or other structures that are out there, decks, etc. Maintain that distance between the tree canopies. And again, another diagram showing how the tree canopy spacing is tapered. The farther away it is from the home, the closer it can be. Closer to the home, we want more distance there. And then on that slope, if we're down slope or the fire potentially can run up a slope, we want to maybe thin it deeper on that slope, thin out more, or if there's potential for the fire to come from that direction. Right in that 30 to 100 foot, we'll also want to keep ground fuel to a minimum to prevent fire from reaching the lower branches of trees. So keep those ladder fuels trimmed up. Typically 6 feet, maybe more if you can. And that takes continual maintenance in that zone there. You can see here, we've got a steep slope, and like one of the earlier slides, you'll see they have to go deeper on these steep slopes with the vegetation management. So there's a lot of references out there that can help you with that. Look at where your home is placed in relation to slopes. So that upper left picture of the house there is in the most vulnerable spot, where it is at the pretty much at the lip of that slope there. It's going to catch a lot of radiant heat, or excuse me, convective energy as fire burns up that slope. And then you can see where it's set back on the slope is much better. Most of that radiant heat, or excuse me, convective energy is going to go up and over that home, right? And along with that is the embers as well. Then here we have, fire runs upslope much faster typically than it does downslope. Although I think you may have read that some of these fires in the Sierras have burned up one side and down the other with real intensity. So we, depending on if we have these Santa Ana winds pushing or sundowners pushing fire downslope, it could accelerate there as well. But typically fire and heat rises and goes upslope. So having your house at the bottom of the slope is usually safer. But here you can see they have a barrier wall here to catch rolling material or embers that may travel down, or the fire maybe even stop it. All right, here's where we're looking at the ignition zone. So you saw how we go out to 100 feet, and we may not have 100 feet in our property. We're looking at what our neighbor's doing. And the more that we do together as a community here, the better off we are protected as a community, right? So if our neighbor, if we've done everything for our home, but our neighbor's house has got all kinds of brush and heavy fuels around it, then our house is going to be more vulnerable and threatened. But if we all work together, we can increase that defensible space, that thinning, that home hardening, and prevent structure to structure ignition. So I'm going to show you a real quick video here that kind of recaps some of this, and then we'll get into some questions.
About 5 years ago, I was in the pre-evacuation zone, and I had embers in my backyard. That was very, very scary. Embers can travel up to 2 miles. They're going to drop in on your property, and that's what's going to start the vegetation on fire. I am excited about reducing the wildfire risk because it does increase your chances of your home still standing if you do your work. We're working with the homeowners here today, reducing the wildfire risk. Collaboration is really key in this whole process. It's never one person making all the decisions. The homeowner makes the choices as far as what gets removed and what they want to have done.
They taught us about how fires spread, either with ground cover and bushes and fuel that adds as a ladder to catch the trees on fire. They also taught us about how if there is a wildfire, the top of our trees, the crowns of our trees are likely to catch fire, and it's good to create space around the trees as well.
The most common misconception about reducing your wildfire risk is that it's clear cutting. It's not clear cutting, it's about making choices.
We were able to identify trees that we wanted to preserve on the property.
We weren't left out of it at all.
So when we talk about the home ignition zone, we want to start from the area 0 to 5 feet away from your house. You want to make sure that you have your pine needles off the roof or any leaves that are going to collect up there, anything that's going to be in your gutters, and then go down to the bottom of your house. And if you look where the wind has blown the needles and the leaves, that's exactly where the embers are going to blow in. And so the embers are going to light those things on fire, which is going to light your house on fire. And then from there, 5 feet to the 30 feet, we want to look at that, kind of feather out the vegetation, stagger things, make spaces between your vegetation, so it's going to be a lot safer. Also, you're looking at grasses and shrubs. Those can be highly flammable. You want to make sure that you keep those knocked down so that those aren't the ladder fuel then to the next vegetation that you have. This side of your property looks great. I saw the before pictures. I saw that you had trees leaning over your deck. They were very close to your house. And by removing those trees, because of their potential problems, this is much, much safer. You can do this yourself. It's not that hard. You can get a pair of loppers. You don't have to have a chainsaw. You can have hand tools, but it's pretty rewarding. It's like house cleaning outdoors. If you can't do this yourself, you can talk to landscapers, tree companies. Potentially your fire department may come out and give you some ideas. The state forestry, anybody that has a knowledge of the fire behavior that's going to be happening on your property, and also somebody that has an eye for what it's going to look like when they're done.
I was so nervous in that maybe it would look so different, but it's beautiful now. It looks great, and it was a fun day, actually. We hope that we've done enough to make it safer for our house, safer for the firefighters that do come in.
Our neighbors are now very interested in having the same thing done to their property, and if we can get that done, it's going to make the whole neighborhood safer.
Science has proven that doing this type of work to reduce your wildfire risk has been very successful. Make a smart choice.
All right, very good. So now it's up to you. What are you going to do? So seriously think about this. You know, after this presentation, one of the things that's come up is a lot of programs are out there talking about this stuff, but we really don't know what the impact is. How many people are actually doing something to improve their situation, improve their survivability for their structure and their property? So what are you going to do? Really think about that. There's some simple things. They don't need to be very complex. You can see that in the video and in the presentation. You know, I think a good understanding of wildland fire behavior is essential. That's why I spend so much time on that, so that you can help make decisions. You can understand what the potential is instead of just reading a brochure that tells you what to do. You want to assess those vulnerabilities and structure ignition potential for your structure. So take a good look at that. Set your goals. You don't have to do it all in one shot, right? What can we do this week, this month, next year, right? I'm phasing in a lot of these things at my house, right? As we go. And every time an opportunity comes up, oh, I need to repaint. I'm going to repaint it this way. I'm going to make sure I do a lot of caulking instead of just have somebody spray it with a new color or color again, fill in those cracks. Window needs to be replaced. Make sure you replace it with a fire resistant type. So develop that plan and then take action, start implementing that plan. And you can do some really simple things. You know, a lot of this stuff is just maintenance, cleaning, describing it properly for maybe your yard maintenance folks to do it so they understand and can do a better job for you. We talked about working together already. I'll move on to really questions, right? So we have a few minutes, but I'll hang out here as long as necessary to answer questions, and as long as Andy's good with that, and then we can contact me later through email or phone. I'll help out with that. Also wanted to it's Jim Niss is here. He's one of my associates that helped develop this program that I just presented. Did an awful lot of work in this presentation and our training program, et cetera. So we do offer a more comprehensive, more detailed training program, and then home ignition zone service inspections and wildfire risk analysis. All right, so are there any questions out there?
Yeah, feel free to unmute, type into the chat. Or of course, you have all of our contact info. You can follow up later if you have any additional questions too. As people are thinking about some possible questions, you know, the biggest thing I kind of want to mention here, and Woody got on it at the end, is be prepared. Do your work now. Do what you can this week, right? Get those emergency lists, go ready, walk around the house. As calm as you are throughout your life, emergency situations bring out the worst in everyone. So think ahead and be prepared, and that's what this is all about. So let's not wait till the red flag warning to be doing all this. That's just a sign that it should be done, and if it's not, take a quick walk around. Good,
anything out there I can help with? And please just unmute your mic if you have a question.
Yeah, be as specific as you would like. Well,
A couple things to add then while we're just making sure if anybody has any questions. There's this. Oh, go ahead with the question.
First of all, thank you so much for your presentation. I really appreciate it. I actually lost my home in the Thomas fire, and we're living out in Oakview now, and we are of course surrounded by shrub and oak trees. You know, dealing with that whole aspect of, you know, hardening our home. So how would you recommend dealing with oak trees that are large and surround your home? And obviously you can't take those out. So what do you do with a situation like that? Or with large parcels where you have hardened your landscape, but your neighbors are not doing so?
Right. Okay. So yeah, the oak tree issue. It's about maintenance and how you maintain that tree. So we've seen some large oak trees overhanging structures that are really not a threat. Some of the issues are removing the dead vegetation in there, make sure it's thin, it can't catch a lot of embers, aren't places for fire to start and really generate a lot of heat. You've removed the ground fuels, those ladder fuels that can come up, and then take a good look at the tree's health and think about any place where there's an opening, just like your structure. Often those oak trees have branches that have fallen off, or there might be some rot or some openings where animals have gotten in. That's where the embers get in, and then they'll ignite that tree, burn it from the inside out, and it'll sit there for days burning and throwing off embers, which could continually threaten your structure. So I think if you're having a large tree with some health issues, contact an arborist and see what they might have suggestion-wise for you. Do you have any other suggestions, Andy?
No, that's about it. I know it's an issue, especially with oaks in Ventura County, because they're protected over a certain dBH diameter at breast height, which I believe is 4 inches. But yeah, just reach out to the local arborist and, like what he was saying, train that out over the years to work better. We got a question here in the chat. Is there a fund for elderly persons to harden their property? That's a good question. And I'm guessing you're asking for a cost share funding opportunity where hardening is paid for and is implemented by an organization such as a horticulture company. I know locally there's stuff we're trying to work on with some of the fire safe councils and the Resource Conservation District to make that cost share program. But Woody, do you know any on the state or national level right now? I don't know of any cost share program right now going on.
No, I'm not aware of that. The only thing is that the Fire Safe Council is having chipper days,
Yeah.
right? Where you can, instead of having the stuff hauled off, they'll do that for free. And I would hope that in the future there is some cost share or something for more vulnerable communities where there's funding to help actually make some improvements instead of just awareness.
Yeah, like I said, I know the Resource Conservation District and the Fire Safe Councils are looking into that. Just a matter of getting the ear of the state agencies. But I think it's just a matter of time. Because as Woody said before, it's great to have all these talks. It's great to educate everyone. But we need to actually see real implementation at the end of the day. And that comes down to dollars because it's expensive. And we understand that. We had another question here. Can you explain?
One more answer on that. And I don't know if Jim Niss is still with us, but he's a member of a volunteer organization that does Habitat for Humanity type things. And Jim, are you there? Flipping the name of it right now. It's the Veterans Group. There you are.
Looks like it's coming in rough.
Or maybe you can text us.
Yep.
You're breaking up pretty bad, Jim. If you can text or chat that information. Sorry, I forgot the name of that group. So Jim works with a volunteer group that goes out and does some brush clearing. They're veterans that volunteer their time to do some of this. They may be able to organize something for your area.
Team Rubicon. Perfect.
Team Rubicon,
Thank you.
that's it.
Thank
All
you,
right,
Jim.
thank you, Jim.
Perfect. We got a question. Can you explain the difference in preparedness between forested and chaparral areas?
Oh, very good. So a lot of the videos that you see and the information is all based on trees, right? And here we are in Southern California, and there's a tree in sight except for that one oak tree, right? Yeah, we don't have those typical kind of forests, but the same, everything applies the same to the brush or any type of fuel, the grass. So thinking of those brush species as trees, those have canopies. We want to thin those out, remove that fuel, space those things out as well. And all the principles are pretty much the same.
Yep. Exactly. All right, we'll do one last call here for some questions. Otherwise, we have our contact info in the chat. We can always follow up. So before we close, though, I do want to note some of our current program offerings that the Ventura County Conservation District offers. Oh, before we do that, we got Bruce. What resources are available for assessments in neighborhoods? Well, Woody offers some of that, and we did too, but I'll let you start with that, Woody.
Right, so we can do a detailed report for you or for your insurance company or whatever you might need. We're available to provide those, and the Fire Safe Council or Resource Conservation District may have some grant funding to provide some of those services as well. So I'll let Andy address that.
Yes, we do. We will early next year. We'll be having funding to come out and give evaluations also, and maybe we could work that into some kind of cost program so we could work with Woody. But nonetheless, early next year, if you're signed up to our list servers, we will be announcing it that we'll be starting to do homeowner ignition zone evaluations. And we'll also be working with the other fire safe councils in the region. We're all trying to get on the same page here and offer some good information. So soon enough, hopefully real soon. I know Ventura Regional Fire Safe Council, and Jim, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe they're already doing their home ignition zone evaluations. And they're your local fire safe council also. Yes, they are. So feel free to reach out to me. My email's in the chat and I can follow up with that info in the meantime. All right, so like I said, before we close, I want to note some of our other programs that we offer other than the home ignition zone program I just chatted about. The first being our free wildfire demonstration garden tours that Woody talked about in the beginning that you can see behind me. It's an opportunity to meet one-on-one with an RCD staff member walking through our property, which is a Harden landscape, to talk about wildfire and what you can do around your home. We also offer a toolkit for those who join. We also offer fire recovery assistance, technical assistance, and financial assistance for those who have been impacted by wildfires. Let it be redesigning the landscape, controlling erosion, both, or just recovering from a recent wildfire and properly restoring the landscape around your home. We do offer those kind of services. And of course, we offer this sort of speaker series and educational talk. This will be occurring throughout the next 2 years bi-monthly. as I said. So that being said, thank you for being in attendance tonight. We appreciate the engagement and discussion. Our next free wildfire educational talk will take place on Tuesday, November 2nd at 6 p.m. discussing wildfire and insurance with the local insurance rep. If you want to be added to our distribution list, or if you have any additional questions, please, like I said, feel free to email myself. I did enter some of those sign-up links into our chat during the presentation. And a big thank you, Woody, for taking the time to speak with us tonight and for condensing such a complex presentation into less than 1 hour. It's usually about a 3-day course and 1 day out in the field. And once more, a big thank you to each community member here tonight, willing to take the steps necessary to prevent the devastating effects of the next wildfire. Because as we all said, you know, it takes a community, it takes a town to do this. So you guys are all working together and we really do appreciate it. As they say, wildfire is coming. Are you prepared? All right, well, have a good night, everyone, and thank you for coming. Recording will be posted within 1 week on our webpage.